observe these patterns and be strict with yourself. Say to yourself, I'm not going to engage on this thought. I'm going to engage on and come up with an idea about something else, something positive, something that gives you a sense of pleasure. And when you're feeling a little bit calmer, you can go back and address that particular thought or that particular challenge. But if you're not engaging with it in a proactive, solution-oriented manner, you really need to try and not think about it. You have got to make decisions, and this is a time when you're going to have to make decisions, and engaging in those kind of patterns is just going to rob you of the time and thinking space in which you need to be at your sharpest and your best. The other thing I want to talk about is self-judgment and shame. And I'm not going to go into this too much, but what happens is a lot of people are looking for answers and they're joining calls like this, but they're not doing the important step. They're not actually having conversations with the people they need to have, with their families who they may not be able to support, with their suppliers or their customers who they feel they're going to let down. So I just got to go back into my my history book of experiences. I was once dealing with a businessman who had a very good business, but he ran into trouble. And I said to him, Ian, go and have an authentic conversation with your largest funder and creditor. And he said to me, what is an authentic conversation? So I said to him, it's where you tell the person about what you're going through without adopting a victim mindset and just owning up to the situation and being open to engaging on it and working out a solution. He came back to me that evening and he was crying. And he said to me, he'd been avoiding that conversation for about 6 months. And he'd been avoiding it in such a way because his largest funder, who had a large financial services company, was also a friend of his. He'd been doing all kinds of things to avoid it and making rash and bad decisions. And he said to me that it was the most meaningful day of his life because he allowed himself to be vulnerable and he allowed himself to open himself to engaging with people who could offer input into the situation he was in. And he was expecting judgment. I mean, the person was obviously upset, but he felt that would be the end of it. And actually it was not. So I think we're all going to learn some very interesting things during this time, and we're going to be surprised about how the people who we are engaged with, including our employees who we might have to let go, will respond and engage. And you have to allow yourself to be open to that because none of us are going to get through this on our own. And none of us are going to get through this by closing off to those conversations. And at the end of my little spiel, we can talk about some opportunities that maybe even ORT Jet can offer. And that's just something I want to talk about. All right. So those are a couple of things that I've observed in the work that I've been doing the last 20 plus years. Okay. So Lisa, in my preparation for this talk, I asked Lisa for an overview of what had been discussed and the nature of the businesses of people who'd registered for this talk. And I don't know if those who are listening here are or those who responded, but my understanding is that many people here have small businesses. And whilst I understand that people's personal situations are very, very challenging, we have to proceed with this conversation from a very key principle. And that is that your business situation is not the same as your personal situation. So when we look at what we do in a business framework, we can't be looking at what our personal situation demands of us. So a lot of people construct their business activities and their need for monthly funding around how they perceive they need to fund their personal life. And what that means is that they're not asking the questions that they need to about their business, and they're not focusing on their business. We have to get to a point where we accept that our personal situations are challenging and difficult for those of us who are in those situations. And then you have to, and I don't want people to get angry with me now, but for the purposes of this exercise, we need to put that personal situation into a bubble and suspend it and let it be. So, you know, we may not be able to afford our school fees. Some of us are maybe concerned about how we're going to feed our families. And that can be a source of huge distress. But in terms of the decisions you're going to be making around your business, you need to create space to focus purely on your business. All right. So I want to just talk about our businesses for a moment, because what follows next around critical decision making requires that we ask some questions about our understanding of what our business is. And for those of you who think that it's not that necessary, I can tell you, I went into a company with turnover in the billions. There were 5 chartered accountants who were on the management team. And I started asking very basic questions. And they looked at me blankly. If I go into a business in distress or work with people in distress and they have all the sharp answers, then often it means that I have very little to offer. But when people look at me, or to the extent that they can't distill what their business is into a very short sentence and subsequently inform properly of questions around that business, then I know that there's stuff for us to work on. And that is where we need to shift from. We need to shift from worrying about how we're going to pay things and how we're going to deal things to actually asking questions about what do we understand about our business. There's a very good business writer called Michael Collins, just very briefly, who just wrote a book on this exact thing called The Fifth Risk. And he was working with Barack Obama and for 6 months. And he started interviewing someone who dealt with all the energy crises, all the energy framework in the United States. And he said to the guy, "What are your 5 big challenges?" And this guy rattled off 4: nuclear attack, all of these things. And he struggled with the 5th. And Michael Collins said, "That's the one that's going to get you." So we need to start asking ourselves very basic questions around our business. So I just want to, so I like very simple things, and I'm going to try and see how this works. I hope it works. But this is a very basic, can you see, Lisa? Can you see that pie chart? Whoops, let me just pin myself because I can't see my video.
Move it to your left.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Got it.
All right. So this is very simple, which hopefully we can grasp the general concept. So this blue circle is, so the way I look at a business is I'll ask people to explain to me not what their business is, but to explain to me what is the opportunity they're looking to execute on. What is the business they're looking to execute on? All businesses in distress focus on what their business is and look at their business as to what they have and are trying to make it work. This is the amount of fixed expenses I have. This is what I have to generate in order to be able to generate a reasonable return on my assets, or at least generate enough cash flow to see myself through the end of the month. I come from a very, very different perspective. And this is where I believe, if you look at this, you can actually start to create a proactive and creative thinking space in terms of understanding how to engage in your business. So the blue circle is the market that you believe that your opportunity exists in. It could be a descriptor of a particular market segment of an industry. It could be a geographic delineation. It could be a activity delineation. You have to work out, and this is what I help people do, is to understand what is the market that they're in. This black triangle is the opportunity that people believe they can execute on. So in other words, I believe, for example, that I'm in, well, I'm currently in the wine industry. So, sorry, it made me laugh. So, so this is, for example, wine sales in the world. Or I could say this is wine sales in South Africa, or I could say this is wine sales in the Western Cape and wine sales to high-income individuals. Or this is wine sales to high-income individuals who are interested in red wine if I'm only going to be producing red wine of a certain caliber, and I don't intend to distribute it outside of that market space. So depending on your perspective, you will create a story around what that market is. The opportunity is the opportunity that you think that you can execute on in the time frame that you that you've created as a reference, a frame of reference for this conversation. So it could be in the next 3 months. Like, let's say you get into hand cleaning substances, you know, that could be like a month framework or a 6-month framework. Or if you're doing something that's a little bit more time intensive, like a property development, you know, that could be over 5 years or something. Or you want to get into the rental market, you will set your time frame, but you will say that in the time that I'm making as my plan, I think I can execute that as a market share. And the red little section that is what I think is going to be the profit in that segment that I've identified that I believe is achievable and realizable based on my time frame. And then sitting under that, and this is where all businesses that are in distress get it wrong, or often, is understanding what resource base I need to execute on this opportunity in this market to achieve that profit. The resource base is not necessarily financial. Depending on the industry in, it'll be particular types of skill sets. It'll be access to, for example, if you need ministerial access, if it could be funding, it could be premises specific, etc., etc. So I want you all, when you have time, and now is the time, believe it or not, it's not the kind of thing that you can delay. You need to start asking yourself, how well do I understand this? In my market, how many opportunities are there? How many participants are there? How many transactions are there? How much revenue is there? In the opportunity I'm identifying, what is the time lag? What is between me approaching an opportunity and executing on it? What is my conversion rate? So you start to understand how much time and how much resources you need to dedicate to make this opportunity a reality. And what good businesses do is they keep going back to this market and this opportunity, and they keep revisiting their resources, which is why businesses do projections and budgets. Most businesses in distress look at their budget as something that accountants do, and it's just an extrapolation of what has been done before. It's not. Okay? A good budget is a bedtime story. It's a story which in figures, it just distills a story into figures. But if you can't tell the story, then you've got problems. Or to the extent that you can't tell the story, you've got problems, because that means that you are not making decisions to the extent, informed decisions to the extent that you can. And this for me is like one of my big bugbears about people with financial degrees, is that they haven't learned to become storytellers. There are good financial directors out there, but it's a small percentage of financial directors who are good storytellers, who can tell you what I think is going to happen and why I think what has happened, and then in the future can explain why there is that departure. So you may say to me, David, what is this got to do with critical decision making and creating critical decision making paths? Because without a foundation of understanding what information you need, you're going to make poorly formed decisions. And in times of distress, our emotions cloud our ability to properly engage with the data that we have at our disposal. So I hope you guys have all had a chance to read what I wrote. I wrote that as a favor to someone, and then a couple of friends of mine, some who run very big businesses in overseas and locally, started giving me feedback on it and said that it was of value to them, which is why they asked me, actually, some of them asked me to post it up on LinkedIn and Medium and these resources that I actually don't use, because I don't really work on my my presence on platforms. But when we start talking about working on a decision tree, this is the reason why we do it. We do it to ask ourselves questions that around things that we're not 100% sure of. And what I say to people when they do decision trees is, work through the options that are obvious and that you would discount because you don't believe that they're worth considering. Through that process of working through things that you think are either options or that they're not even options at all, because you just don't believe that you can access them, you're not testing your mindset. So I think if we all look at ourselves and we look at the situations that we're in, I don't think there is a single person amongst us who thinks that at every point in the last year, every decision we have made has been optimal. Obviously, you need to be able to look at yourself. Some people struggle with that process because, or at least to admit to that they haven't been making optimal decisions. And that process of of being defensive around the decisions that you've made is part of creating a victim mindset. Nothing that I've done would create a different situation to the situation that I'm in. You know, that kind of mindset. But the only thing that we can do, and the only thing that I want people to take away from this talk, is the only thing that's going to allow you to engage in your situation and in the future is action. Everything else, nothing will translate into the real world, and nothing will impact on your situation in business or life unless you engage in action. What I'm trying to do is steer you towards a process that will allow you to ensure that the actions that you're engaging in will be better than they would have had you not engaged in this process. I'm not suggesting that they're going to be perfect. because we all know we're in business. And part of the way of engaging in business is to fail or to make suboptimal decisions. But to the extent that we don't learn from them, then obviously we're likely to repeat them, and all that effort and energy that we put into would be wasted. So I want us, or you, in 12 months, 18 months, to look back at this process and go, it was so hard. There was a time when I honestly, truly did not think I would get through it, personally, business-wise. But on reflection, wow. The learnings I got, the relationships I developed. Whilst I wouldn't wish or hope to be in the situation again, I can honestly say it was valuable to me. It's kind of the way what I described it the other day as the MBA you don't want but have to have. All right. So I just want to have a quick look at my notes. If you just give me 1 sec, just to see that I haven't left out anything. All right. So okay, so let's go back to that business story. So the question we need to get to is, do we actually have a business? And through working through that framework, you will start to get a better understanding as to whether that is true. You may not have a business based on how you set up your business in the past, but you may still have a business to the extent that you're looking at that opportunity and you've decided to execute on it in a slightly different way to the way that you have to this moment. So I just want to show you my second funny little diagram here. Okay, it's totally non-specific and general, but this is how I work with people and construct decision trees. So I start off with decisions that I need to make, and I have like a yes or no, and then that takes me to another decision point, and I might have a yes or no or multiple options or decisions to make, and I map them out. And like I said, the important step here is not actually this process, but how you challenge your thinking. So deal with things that you would normally discount. Deal with opportunities or options that are fanciful. Okay? And then what we do is these red squares are the ones that are my preference. The outcomes that are preferential to me. And then what I start doing is I start looking at the probabilities, and I start identifying the cost and the benefit of each of those opportunities or other considerations that I might need to. And then what I do is I work back the ones that I've tried to implement, and those give me my action steps. And that then becomes my decision path and the framework for the action steps that I need to implement. Before I open up, I mean, I've been speaking for longer than I wanted to, and I hope that everybody's been following the drift. But I think maybe we kind of just need, I just want to touch on 1 or 2 additional points. So ORT Jet is obviously a group of people who have a common interest, common background, common considerations. So Japan has a habit of creating things called kairetsus, which are kind of business groupings, often based around a key funder, a key bank. But what those kairetsus do is they contract to support the people that are part of that grouping. So in a time where we are feeling very alone and isolated, physically as well, it's very important to work out, to try and develop a grouping which has, Lisa, a couple of key principles around mutual support. So you've obviously done something quite incredible here to create a platform, and you've been curating the space. But I challenge you to see how you can use it more in terms of creating frameworks and networks where people say, look, these are my requirements, these are my opportunities that I can't execute on, but I'd like to share, or this is how I need support, and seeing how you can facilitate it. There are business groupings out there, lots of them, but you have obviously created a unique space, and maybe that's something that you want to explore. Just in terms of going through decision trees or speaking to people or looking at your business or understanding how you've described your business opportunity, you need to really test that understanding either with your financial consultants, your key customers, your key suppliers, or maybe even for those of you who are in really small businesses or maybe feel that you don't really want to go to those people and engage with them in that way and say, look, I'm really revisioning my business here and I'd like your input. Maybe people who've dialed into this talk could make themselves available and have a go at it and maybe work in like a pairing. I don't know if that's something that is possible or that people want to consider, but we should not be engaging in these exercises alone. If you look at the most successful business people in the world, they all have a strong mentorship framework. None of us has achieved anything without standing on the shoulders or getting the support of others. None of us have achieved anything without being guided, mentored, chastised, criticized, whatever. So, and I've learned this when I go into businesses to run them, I just totally flatten the structure. I expect people in the companies I work with to challenge me, criticize me, my thinking, my behavior, my understanding. From the word go, I want no respect, as it were. I want people to respect the process. I want people to respect the exercise. And that allows me to put myself on the fastest learning curve, which I need to when I'm going into a challenge business. But it also unlocks a lot of value. People who come to work often do things because that's how they believe they need to behave, or they believe that's their job. But in their own, and you can think about this for those of you who are employees or part of a business grouping. These are people who deal with crisis management at home, they deal with strategy planning around their family. A lot of those skills are actually transportable into a business framework. When you have very highly structured business environments, which in some business environments is necessary, but in most not, in my opinion, unlocking value where people can challenge you, etc., you actually unlock a lot of value. So a lot of the businesses that I have turned around haven't taken in external funding. We've just become really sharp about what our opportunity is, and we've started getting our staff engaging in our business in a way that they haven't before. And my favorite story around this is I once opened up most management executive meetings to the whole company. And this was a highly hierarchical environment where people, were very precious about their titles and their car spaces. And one day a storeman came into the meeting and he started throwing questions at the managing director. And the managing director couldn't answer it. These really good questions. So I distributed a questionnaire of 12 questions to everyone in the company. And I took the best answers and I created a meeting. And none of the best answers came from the guys in the key roles in the executive. And 3 days later, the MD didn't even bother coming to work. So what I'm saying is there's often a lot of knowledge. People around your company are having conversations with suppliers, distributors who come to your premises if you're in distribution. And they often have a lot of knowledge that's not unlocked. And this is why in in one of the points in that little summary that I wrote, I said that it's often very important to share your situation with your key customers, your key suppliers, to the extent that you believe it's wise to do so, because you will find out that you're part of a value chain and you're all invested in each other. So I'm in a distressed organization, but we're also the largest wine supplier to Woolworths. And we're in an industry where, especially for the product that we supply Woolworths, it's a commodity. We've done amazing things in that relationship. We have bent over backwards to supply them. But Woolworths came to the party when we were in distress, and they provided us with unbelievable assistance. So thumbs up to Woolworths. But what I'm trying to say is, in this current role that I have, the people that you would think would run a mile are actually the people who come to the party. And what that means is that we will supply them and support them with even greater fervor and gusto, and we will be more open and transparent around challenges we have. And that's how you create stronger interlocking relationships. And that's why this time and this process can be very important in embedding relationships that will allow you to maximize benefit when the business environment improves, as it must. Lisa, I don't know if there's anything that you want to question or whether that's enough, but I think I've said more than enough, and I hope that for your network, you feel that this was a valuable use of your time and that you were able to get benefit out of it. And I want to thank everyone for giving me their time. I do have a keen sense of how challenging and difficult this is, and I send you all my deep support and stector. All right, I'm pretty much done.
Great, thanks, David. A lot of input, a lot of guidance, a lot of stuff to digest and reflect on, which will take some time for all of us. Let's open up to some questions. Please post them in the chat box so we can address, as we've got about 10 more minutes left. Okay, let me start. Okay. Any questions?
All right, then let's have a good weekend.
Wait. What are the one-on-one equations we sold be able to answer? David, you see that question?
Yeah, maybe Ben can. It's hard for me to understand, Ben, what you're asking.
Okay, I'll open
maybe
it
you can
up.
take him off mute and.
Sorry, I was trying to type that very quickly because it felt like people were about to sign off. My question is, what are the most simple questions me as a small business owner should be able to answer about my business? In other words, like the absolute basic foundational questions, the least complicated questions that I should have answers to.
What's your business, Ben?
It's called Urban Harvest. We design, install, and manage organic food gardens at private residences, hotels and restaurants, and community projects around the city.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that you're doing something very important. So I think you need to understand your value chain very, very clearly. So you need to understand who your customer is, because obviously your supply side, obviously your supply side determines the quantity of product that you have, because you have a particular way of sourcing that product. So you need to understand your customer, and you need to understand how often they buy, how much of their disposable income they're prepared to spend. So how price elastic they are, especially in challenging times. Because that obviously, I don't understand well, I don't understand. I don't know your, what you fund. Do you fund seeds for people's gardens? Do you go and prepare? Obviously, I'm currently living on a farm right now, and I was drinking a bottle of wine with one of my neighbors yesterday, who's a horticulturist, who's passionate about doing what you're doing. So we actually had a conversation about the whole, this whole particular industry and artisanal activity. And the nice thing about your niche is it's quite defensible, but you really need to understand your value chain, to understand your costs, and understand whether you can charge a price that that will allow you a profit, and that you will still understand that impact on your customers. I will say there was one other thing I wanted to say. Okay, it dropped me, but I think that's the key thing. Obviously, the bigger issue is for me in my industry. The thing that really nails wine producers and distributors is distribution costs. It's absolutely massive. So obviously you need to find creative ways so obviously one of the things I would consider in terms of your question is how widely spread are my customers, and if I exclude my outlying customers and just focus on people who are in tightly concentrated urban centers, which obviously can have a big impact on my ability to get product to them, what will my market look like? And then obviously that would have an impact on, how much supply you're investing. But then you can look at other diverse ways to mitigate risk in terms of what support you're prepared to give to people who want to create that space on their facilities. It could be consultative, etc. But you need to first understand which part, those then start becoming broadening or maybe additional kind of opportunities. You can move into consultative roles, but that then could be putting weight on your management time. And obviously you want to be quite concentrated about what you want to do. So if you think that you want to get 100% of that market and you're only at 20%, within, unless there's a cross benefit, you're not going to start offering consulting services to people who want to create organic gardens, etc. You want to really be focused on what you do and not get diverted. I don't know if that is of any value.
You've asked me a lot more questions and not given me any answers, but you did say that up front, and that's fine. They're valuable questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So then I'm not here. So the whole thing is this: I go into companies and industries, and I'll often land up making very good decisions. Well, mostly, and I often start showing, like in this industry, the people in this industry who have been involved with this industry generationally, and in this company. And in my first board meeting with them, I flipped their whole vision of this company and how it got to where it was, to an extent that it totally surprised me, because I would have thought it would have been obvious to them. So I don't normally go and give people answers. You are going to be the master of your own destiny. You're going to be the best informed person. For you to come to someone like me and expect me to have more knowledge about your industry or your business than you do, if that is the case, then you got groot problems. But what we can do is we can inform you so that you ask the right questions and focus your activities in the right way to get maximal benefit. So this is the point I said in the beginning. This is your journey. And each of you is going to have to be the master of your own destiny. And every time you start feeling that other people are going to have answers for you, tap yourself on the hand and say, no, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to go and get information, get data, but then I'm going to curate it. And at the end of the day, the decisions I make on a daily basis are my decisions. And to the extent that I have issues and problems, they're going to be my learnings and my opportunities. Okay.
Thank you.
But you have to, if you want specific answers, I can send you something afterwards.
David,
Thank
a
you.
question from Norman Katzif. How do you deal with your staff in a professional manner in the case of retrenchments? This
Yeah.
being relevant to the dire situation at hand and trying to be a bit personal.
No, it's very personal. So, so because this is a Jewish group, I don't know if any people know about Shvili Israel, but it's a trail in the north of Israel. Well, the trail through the whole of Israel, but in the north, there's a museum at one of the first kibbutzes. And there was a framed picture of a saying, which I believe is essential. It says, Kodem kol tiyeh adam, which means before all other things, be a human being. So I've retrenched hundreds of people in my time. The first time is always the hardest. It is a terribly hard thing. It doesn't stop being hard. But at the end of the day, the golden goose is the business. And that is why I think my last point is quite relevant in this. So, Norman, I'm not dealing with the process of retrenchment. Michael Katz was on your show, was on this network. I work with labor consultants who come in and manage the process. But I always invite people who've been retrenched to come and challenge my thinking, etc. And I owe that to them. But the thing is, if you value your staff, you can say to them, as some businesses have, look, I can't afford to pay you, but I need you. I can offer to pay you 20% or 10%, or I can't pay you anything, but I will try and make good. And this is where you discover the value in your business. Even if you're not generating revenue, even if you don't have cash flow, if you have developed relationships, if you have integrity, if your staff respect you, then they understand that you are an essential part of their life. And it's essential for them to support you. And as long as you are not being mercenary and abusive, you may find that people are prepared to come and work for you for nothing. Maybe you just have to cover their transport costs. On the understanding that should things get better, that you will then give them benefit. So, staff decisions, when I talk about making decisions, there are repercussions to decisions. And it's good for me, it's good to own those repercussions, understand them, not shy away from them. But don't let that stop you from making decisions. This is what a decision tree is about. It's about looking at things, and that's why I said each of those decisions have got a cost and a benefit. Financial, qualitative, whatever, non-financial. But you're going to have to make tough decisions. And unless Norman, you can be clear about why you're not retrenching someone when you need to. And if you can understand the cost and you decide not to retrench someone even though you understand that cost, then obviously you can do it, but you must make decisions. And I want to say one last thing. Not making a decision is a decision. It's a decision not to make a decision, and there are consequences to not making decisions. The interesting thing is, if you're able to, or you have a mentor, or you have someone that you're going to buddy up with, observe the role of emotions in the decisions or non-decisions that you make. And hold it up in the day of light, write them down. Don't just think them, because your mind will stop you from making decisions. Your biases, your filters, your desire to not engage, your sense of shame, your desire to prove to yourself that you are a failure, that you shouldn't introduce hope or a different possibility in life. All of those things will get in the way of you engaging. But in black and white, if you write down the implications of your decisions and your decision to, for example, not retrench, it becomes quite clear what the cost is. And you have to ask yourself, can I afford that cost? Absolutely, retrenching is a sensitive, consultative way. There's a legal process. Absolutely. And I see that someone is prepared to offer his services. But at the end of the day, the process, the consultative process at the end of the day is not the decision. It's the repercussion of a decision. It doesn't replace the decision. All right. And the labor laws in this country are harsh. They're harsh on employees. All right. I hope that helps, Norman. I've had to retrench a lot of people, and you know, as one of my staff said to me, he doesn't have any money and he lives in a Wendy house with his 5 children. So I get messages from people like that all the time, and I have my own personal ways of engaging with those situations in a way that I'm comfortable with. But in terms of the business I'm in, it was very clear. I had to retrench those people. Lisa?
David, thank you. Our time is up, so I feel it's only right to close off the session. But once again, appreciate everything you've shared. You've given way more than our expectations, and I'm sure everyone has benefited enormously. Just to add, you did mention having a mentor and how important mentorship is. That is the essence of ORT Jet. ORT Jet's purpose and reason really for existence is around the successful mentorship program that we do run. And we know that being an entrepreneur is incredibly isolating, and having a mentor someone in your corner, a mentor that you can talk to, bounce ideas off, be challenged by, and move forward is really the way to go. So thanks for sharing that, and just being part of the ORT Jet network. So thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Good Shabbos and all the best.